My crush pretended to like me back, then laughed in my face. 2 years later, he was begging me to give him a chance. He stood outside my gallery opening in a rented tux that didn't fit right, holding a bouquet of grocery store tulips, and I almost didn't recognize him without 20 people laughing behind him. Julian Ostrander. The same jaw, the same practiced half smile, except now his hands shook when he said my name. 2 years ago, that smile had cost me my scholarship, my roommate, and 11 months of therapy. Now he wanted 5 minutes. I gave him 0, and I want to tell you exactly why, because the version of this story he's telling people isn't the true one, and I have the receipts to prove it. Rewind to sophomore year at Ashgrove College, October, the kind of cold that makes your knuckles crack. I was 19, majoring in illustration, and I had a crush on Julian the way you have a crush on weather you can't control. He sat 2 seats over in comparative lit, always borrowed a pen he never returned, always laughed at my jokes like they were the funniest thing he'd heard that week. For 3 weeks he texted me every night. Screenshots still exist, saved to a cloud folder labeled evidence that I created in a panic and never had the nerve to delete. October 14th, 11:47 p.m. You're actually different from every other girl here, Rem. October 22nd, 1:03 a.m. I keep thinking about you and it's annoying, honestly. I believed every word. I was the kind of stupid that only happens once if you're lucky. He asked me to Kestrel House's fall formal on a Tuesday, in front of the campus coffee cart, loud enough that 3 girls from my dorm turned around. I said yes so fast it embarrassed me. My roommate Priya Anand helped me pick out a dress, teal chiffon, $40 from a thrift store on Concord Street, and she curled my hair with an iron that kept overheating and burning my fingers. I remember standing in our dorm bathroom at 7 p.m., thinking this is the night everything changes. It was, just not the way I thought. The formal was in the Kestrel House ballroom, string lights taped to exposed beams, a keg hidden behind a folding table like nobody would notice. Julian met me at the door with a corsage that didn't match my dress, and I didn't care. He introduced me to his brothers, Preston, Cade, a guy named Bo who wouldn't stop staring at his phone. Everyone smiled too wide. At the time I thought it was excitement. Now I know it was an audience checking a scoreboard. At 9:40 p.m., Julian pulled me onto the small stage where the DJ had set up, grabbed the microphone, and said he had something to tell me. My stomach dropped the way it does on a roller coaster, that half second before you know if you're going to love it or scream. He said, "Ren, I've been wanting to say this for weeks." The room went quiet. I remember smiling so hard my cheeks hurt. Then he said, "I don't actually like you. Never did. It was a bet," and he laughed. Not a nervous laugh. A real one, thrown back head, delighted laugh, and the whole ballroom laughed with him, because they'd all known, because they'd all been in on it, because apparently I was the last person in that room to find out I was a punchline. Here's the detail that still wakes me up at 3 a.m. 2 years later. Someone had filmed it, not on a phone held low and sneaky, on a tripod, positioned, lit. Because this wasn't spontaneous cruelty, this was a production, and I was the unpaid, unwilling lead actress in it, and I didn't find that part out until much, much later. I left the formal without my coat. I walked 4 blocks in 30-degree weather in a $40 dress, and Priya found me sitting on the curb outside our dorm, not crying, just staring, the way you stare when your brain hasn't caught up to what happened to your body yet. She didn't ask questions. She just sat down next to me on the freezing concrete and put her jacket around my shoulders and said, "Whatever he did, we're going to make him regret it." I didn't believe her. I didn't believe anything for a while. The next morning, the video was already circulating. Not publicly. Kestrel House was smarter than that, but through a private group chat called The Vault. 73 members, all current or former brothers, plus a rotating handful of guests who paid $25 a semester for access. I only learned the chat's name 3 weeks later, from a junior named Ines Calloway, who found my number through a mutual friend and said, "I think you should know what you're actually part of." She sent me a screenshot of the group description. It read, "Content only. No screenshots outside chat. Respect the game." Respect the game, like I was a level in something, like humiliating a 19-year-old on camera was a sport with rules and etiquette. That was twist number 1, the one that recontextualized everything I thought had happened to me. This wasn't Julian being cruel on impulse. This was Julian competing. Ines explained The Vault ran a running tally called The List, a scoreboard where brothers earned points for getting girls to publicly declare feelings, propose, or in one entry from 2 years earlier, get a girl's name tattooed. All filmed, all archived, all ranked. Julian was in 3rd place before the formal. My humiliation put him in 1st. I read that message standing in the campus mailroom and I threw up in a trash can meant for junk mail. I want to be honest about what came next because it wasn't triumphant. It was ugly and slow. I dropped 2 classes. I stopped going to the dining hall at normal hours because I couldn't handle people looking at me, or worse, not looking at me, pretending they hadn't seen the clip that had, despite the chat's rules, leaked to maybe 200 people by December. My academic advisor, a man named Dr. Harmon Struthers, told me during a check-in that maybe I should consider whether Ashgrove is the right fit for me right now, phrased gently, like it was my problem to solve by leaving. I didn't know yet that his son, Bo Struthers, was the guy who'd been glued to his phone at the formal, filming. Priya became the only stable thing in my life that semester. She started quietly building a case, screenshotting everything Ines sent her, cross-referencing dates, building a timeline in a shared document titled Homework so it wouldn't look suspicious if anyone saw her screen. She found 2 more girls, Selanaxoy from the year before me, and a freshman named Dot Reyes, who wouldn't talk to us directly but whose best friend confirmed she'd been part of the list the previous spring. A pattern. Not one bad guy, a machine, and Julian was just the arm of it that had reached me. By February, we had 11 screenshots, 4 corroborating statements, and a partial member list of the vault that Inez had risked her own social standing to get us. Priya wanted to go straight to Title IX. I wasn't ready. I kept thinking if I just stayed quiet, it would fade, the way bruises fade. Except bruises don't get reposted every time someone's bored on a Friday night. Priya didn't push. She said, "When you're ready, I've got everything organized, just say the word." I believed she meant it purely for me. That belief lasted 4 more months. The word came in April after Dot Reyes was hospitalized. Not because of Julian directly, she'd never even met him, but because a different brother had run the exact same play on her in March, and the video had circled fast enough that people at her part-time job had seen it before she'd even left the ballroom. She took a bottle of her roommate's sleeping pills. She survived. Barely. That was the moment stakeholder expansion stopped being an abstract phrase in my head and became Dot's mother sitting outside a hospital room and Priya finally saying, "We're filing. Today, I don't care if you're ready." The Title IX complaint named 6 brothers, including Julian, and attached 40 pages of evidence, screenshots, the group chat description, Inez's sworn statement, Saylin's statement, mine. Dr. Struthers, as academic dean of student conduct that year, a detail I didn't know until the hearing, recused himself only after someone on the panel noticed his last name matched a name in the chat logs. That recusal came 4 days late. 4 days in which, evidence later showed, someone inside the administration warned Kestrel House the investigation was coming, giving them time to wipe 2 group chats and reformat a shared drive. We know this because IT support logs, subpoenaed later by the university's outside counsel, showed a mass deletion event at 2:14 a.m., 6 hours after the complaint was formally logged in the system. Someone with access had tipped them off. That's the kind of detail that makes your stomach fold in on itself. The system wasn't just slow, it was leaking. Here's twist number 2. The one I didn't see coming even though I should have. In May, a campus gossip blog called the Ashgrove Ledger published a piece titled Inside Kestrel House's Secret Scoreboard, using details that only someone with access to Priya's shared document could have known. Exact dates, exact phrasing from my private texts to her, even the nickname I'd used for Julian inventing messages that I'd never shown anyone else. I confronted her in our dorm room, holding my phone up, hands shaking so bad I almost dropped it. She didn't deny it right away. Then she told me the truth. Her ex-boyfriend, Cade Winship, had been a Kestrel brother too, one of the 6 named in our complaint, and he'd cheated on her with a girl from the list the year before. Priya hadn't built our case purely to help me. She'd built it at least in part to burn Cade down, and when the university's process moved too slowly for her patience, she'd leaked it to force the issue publicly, using my private pain as kindling without asking me first. I felt something close to what I'd felt at the formal. Not identical. This wasn't a stranger laughing at me on a stage. This was someone who'd held my hand on a curb in the freezing cold, who I'd trusted completely, revealing she'd had her own war running underneath mine the entire time. Micro-hope crushed again. I stopped talking to Priya for 6 weeks. I moved my things into Selin's room down the hall. But here's the ugly, complicated truth the framework of a clean story would erase. The leak worked. Public pressure did what 4 months of internal process hadn't. The story got picked up by a regional paper, then a national women's advocacy account with 2 million followers, and suddenly Ashgrove College couldn't quietly slow-walk an investigation involving a hospitalized 19-year-old anymore. Twist number 3 came in June, during the disciplinary hearing itself, when the university's outside investigator, a former prosecutor named Marguerite Doyle, presented findings that went back further than any of us knew. The list wasn't 3 years old. It was closer to 11. Doyle's team found archived spreadsheets on a graduated brother's abandoned cloud account, a man now 32 years old, working as a financial analyst in Chicago, dating back to when he was a Kestrel pledge himself. 19 names total across a decade. 2 of those women had left Ashgrove entirely and never finished their degrees. One had reported it to campus police back then and been told, according to her own statement submitted to Doyle, that these things happen at every school. It's not worth ruining a young man's future over. The same phrase, worn smooth over a decade of repetition, protecting the wrong people every single time it was said. The hearing lasted 3 days. Julian testified that he didn't understand the scope of what he was part of, a line his lawyer clearly wrote for him, delivered with the same practiced half-smile he'd used on me the first week we talked. I sat 4 seats away from him in that windowless conference room, and watched that smile falter exactly once. When Doyle read aloud a text he'd sent Bo Struthers the morning after the formal, "Number 1 baby, nobody's touching that score this year," he looked at the floor after that. He didn't look at me at all. Kestrel House lost its charter that August. 6 brothers were suspended, 3 expelled outright. Julian, among the expelled after Doyle's report, confirmed he'd known about the scoring system for at least 2 full semesters before targeting me, not the isolated bad decision his lawyer tried to frame it as. Dr. Struthers resigned from his role in student conduct, though he kept his tenured teaching position, a small mercy the university granted him that none of us understood or accepted. Bo transferred schools. Cade Winship, Priya's ex was among those expelled too, which I noticed she never once celebrated out loud, though I saw her crying alone in the campus library the week it happened, and some small stubborn part of me still went and sat with her, because some bonds don't dissolve clean even when they should. I didn't get closure from any of it, not the kind you see in movies. My scholarship situation never fully recovered. I dropped too many classes during the worst months to maintain the GPA requirement, and I graduated a semester late, working 2 jobs to cover the gap. Salen transferred to a different school entirely, said she couldn't look at the quad without seeing the ballroom lights. Reyes and I still text sometimes, mostly just checking in, mostly just "you doing okay today," with no elaboration needed, because we both know what the question really means. Ines Calloway became, unexpectedly, one of my closest friends, the kind of friendship built entirely out of shared damage and mutual respect for the fact that she risked her own social death to hand a stranger the truth. Which brings us back to the tulips, and the rented tux, and Julian Ostrander standing outside my gallery opening 2 years after the formal, telling me he'd changed. He'd spent 18 months, he said, in what he called real therapy, not the court-mandated kind Ashgrove required as part of his expulsion terms, but something he chose himself, after, and I only found out this part later, through Ines, who still keeps tabs on Kestrel alumni, the way some people keep tabs on ex-cult members. After the analyst job he'd lined up in New York rescinded its offer when a background check turned up local news coverage of the Title IX case. He lost the job before he'd even signed the lease on his apartment. His father, he told me, standing there in the cold outside the gallery, stopped speaking to him for 4 months. I lost everything, he said, tulips drooping slightly in his fist. And somewhere in there I finally understood what I took from you. I almost laughed, the way he'd laughed at that formal, except mine wouldn't have been delighted. Mine would have been something closer to grief wearing the shape of a laugh. I told him I believed he might genuinely regret it. I told him regret and repair are not the same currency, and I don't accept the first as payment for the second. I told him that the video still exists somewhere, that I still get a notification maybe twice a year when some new account reposts it with a caption like, "cringe compilation," that Reyes still has a scar on her wrist she covers with a leather cuff she never takes off even in summer, that Selen still can't hear certain songs from that year without her hands starting to shake. I told him none of that was undone by a bouquet of tulips from a grocery store on a Tuesday. He nodded like he'd expected this, like some part of him had rehearsed for rejection the same careful way he'd once rehearsed a public confession that was never true. "I'm not asking you to forgive me tonight," he said. "I just needed you to know I see it now." I told him seeing it 2 years late, only after the consequences arrived at his own front door, wasn't the same as having a conscience. It was just delayed self-interest wearing conscience's clothes. He didn't argue. He set the tulips down on the low wall outside the gallery, said he understood, and walked back toward the parking lot alone, and I stood there in the doorway of a building full of my own paintings. Paintings I'd started making during the worst stretch of that year, dark, fractured self-portraits I never thought I'd hang publicly, and I let myself feel exactly nothing performative about the moment. No triumph, no music swelling, just cold air and grocery store flowers dying slowly on a stone ledge. I run a small peer support group now, unofficial, meeting in the back room of a coffee shop near campus every other Thursday, mostly for women who've been through Title IX processes at Ashgrove and elsewhere, women the system moved too slowly to protect in time. Dot comes when she can. Salen video calls in from her new school. Ines brings printouts of whatever new pattern she's tracking, because these networks never fully die, they just rename themselves and recruit a fresh pledge class. Priya and I are speaking again, carefully the way you handle something that broke once and got glued back together. Functional, visibly seamed, never quite what it was before it cracked. Kestrel House reopened under a different Greek letter combination 18 months after its charter was revoked. Same building, half the same alumni network, quietly funding it. A detail buried in a university trustee meeting record that almost nobody outside our little coffee shop group ever noticed. The system didn't get fixed. It got rebranded the way these things usually do, and somewhere in that rebuilt house there might already be a new spreadsheet, a new scoreboard, a new 19-year-old girl who thinks the boy borrowing her pen is actually looking at her the way she's looking at him. I think about her sometimes, whoever she is, wherever she's sitting right now, still believing the lie is real. He never came back to the gallery again. But 3 weeks later, I got a message from an account I didn't recognize, a girl named Marisol Fehar, 20 years old, still enrolled at Ashgrove, majoring in environmental science. She said she'd found my number through Ines, who apparently now functioned as a kind of underground referral network for anyone who typed the words Kestrel and help into the same sentence. Marisol's message was short. "I think I'm in something I can't get out of. I don't know who else to ask." I stared at it for a long time before I answered, because I recognized the shape of that sentence the way you recognize a scar on someone else's body that matches your own. We met at the same coffee shop where the Thursday group gathers, except it was a Tuesday, and she came alone, 20 minutes early, sitting with her back to the wall like she was watching the door for someone. She had a laptop bag she kept both hands on the whole time, like it might get taken from her. When I sat down across from her, she didn't say hello. She just opened the bag, pulled out a folder of printed screenshots, and slid it across the table the exact way Priya used to slide her homework document toward me 2 years earlier, and something in my chest went cold and familiar at the same time, the way an old bruise aches before rain. "It's not Kestrel," she said. "Everyone thinks that got shut down. It's the new one. They call themselves the Falconers now. Same building, half the guys are legacies, their older brothers were Kestrel. She said it fast, like she needed to get it out before she lost her nerve, and I thought about the trustee meeting record Ines had shown me, the quiet reopening under a new letter combination, the alumni money that never actually left the building even after the charter died on paper. I'd known it in theory. Marisol was the proof that theory had a face now, a real one sitting across from me with chipped blue nail polish and a coffee she hadn't touched. I opened the folder, screenshots, a group chat, this one called The Roost, which struck me as almost darkly funny, like they couldn't even be bothered to invent a fresh metaphor. Same structure, though. A running point system. A pinned message at the top that read, "New season, new rules. Keep it clean this time. No tripods, screen record only." That last part made my stomach drop harder than anything else in the folder. They'd learned. Not to stop, just to leave a thinner trail. "There's a guy," Marisol said, and her voice cracked slightly on the word guy, like even naming him cost her something. "Desmond Price. He's been texting me for 2 months. Told me I was different. Told me his family didn't like the girls he usually dated, but he didn't care what they thought about me." She looked up at me like she already knew what I was going to say, like some part of her had already done the math and was just waiting for someone else to confirm the answer out loud. "Am I being stupid?" "No," I said, and I meant it with a force that surprised me. "You're being exactly as smart as anyone would be who's never had a reason not to trust someone's words." I told her about Julian's texts, the ones still sitting in that cloud folder labeled evidence, the ones I still hadn't deleted 2 years later because some part of me needed proof that I hadn't imagined feeling wanted. She nodded slowly, and I watched her shoulders drop half an inch, just the physical relief of being believed instantly instead of having to argue for it. We spent 2 hours going through the screenshots together. She had more than she realized. A partial member list, 12 names, several of them clearly Kestrel legacies whose older brothers I recognized from Doyle's investigation 2 years earlier. A calendar entry for something called Formal Redux, scheduled for the following month, same building, same string lights probably still taped to the same beams, because nobody at that university ever replaces anything that still technically functions. My hands were shaking by the time we finished, not from fear exactly, more from the sick recognition of watching a wheel turn that I thought we'd broken the axle on. "I want to go to the school," Marisol said, "but everyone says the school just protects them. Everyone says that's what happened last time too, that it only worked because it went public." I didn't lie to her. I told her the truth, which is uglier and more useful than reassurance. I told her that Doyle's investigation had taken 4 months of internal process before anything actually happened, and that the 4 months before that had included a mass evidence deletion at 2 a.m. by someone tipped off from inside the administration, and that even after everything, even after Reyes nearly died, even after national attention, the same building was standing there right now hosting the same rot under a different name. I told her the system doesn't get fixed by trusting it. It gets forced by evidence stacked high enough that ignoring it costs more than acting does. "We build the file first," I said. "Then we go loud, not quiet. Quiet is what let them survive the first time." She asked me why I was willing to help her, when I could have just kept my distance, kept my Thursdays for people who'd already survived it, kept my own scar tissue from being pulled at again. I thought about lying, saying something clean about justice or sisterhood, the kind of line that sounds good in a support group circle. Instead, I told her the real reason, which is that Julian Ostrander stood outside my gallery 3 weeks ago, holding grocery store tulips, and told me he finally understood what he'd taken from me, and I believed he meant it. And it still changed nothing, because understanding 2 years too late doesn't put Dot's scar back under unbroken skin, and I was not going to let another 19-year-old wait 2 years for someone like him to arrive at a realization that should have been obvious from the start. "I'm doing this so the next girl doesn't need a formal apology in a parking lot," I said. "I'm doing it so there isn't the next girl." That night I called Priya for the first time in weeks that wasn't scheduled, wasn't careful, wasn't the seamed glass kind of conversation we'd had since the leak. I told her about Marisol, about the Roost, about Desmond Price and his family's disapproval line that sounded so close to a script it might as well have been photocopied from Julian's old messages. Priya went quiet on the other end for a long moment. Then she said, "I still have the shared document. I never deleted it. I kept thinking someday I'd need the template again. I didn't know whether to feel comforted by her foresight or unsettled by how easily she'd predicted this would happen. How little faith either of us actually had that Ashgrove's punishment 2 years ago had been a real ending instead of an intermission. We rebuilt the file over the following 2 weeks. Evenings at my apartment, Priya's laptop and mine open side by side the way they used to be in our old dorm room, except now we were building something with the specific, grim efficiency of people who'd already learned every mistake the process could make. Ines came too, bringing her own updated tracking of Kestrel alumni cross-referencing Falconer names against her old spreadsheet until we had 17 confirmed members. 4 corroborating statements beyond Marisol's, and a screen recording Marisol herself had taken of Desmond's phone. One night while he was in the shower, a screen recording that showed the Roost's full point tally, current season, his name sitting at number 2 with a note beside it that read, chillingly, "Almost there, don't blow it like Ostrander did. Almost there, don't blow it like Ostrander did." I read that line 4 times before it fully landed, the way a word stops meaning anything if you stare at it too long and then suddenly means everything at once. Julian's failure, his expulsion, his lost job, his father's 4 months of silence, None of it had been treated inside that house as a warning to stop. It had been filed away as a case study in how to do it better next time. Screen record only. Keep it clean. Don't blow it like Ostrander did. His public shame hadn't dismantled anything. It had just updated the manual.